So welcome to this webinar. This is Social Marketing 2020. I'm Neil Wilkins and I'll be taking you through this session. Now, one of the big starting points for this is to define what social marketing is and also what social marketing isn't. Okay, so if you do a Google search for the term social marketing, undoubtedly what you will see is that the return search results will be dominated by social media marketing. Now, this is unfortunately a complete and utter misnomer, because what people don't understand is that these two things are fundamentally different things. Okay, social media marketing is marketing through social media, through social networking, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and the like. Social marketing is not the same as social media marketing. Now, you'll see a lot of larger organizations, a lot of online media companies using these terms interchangeably, and they are fundamentally wrong, because social marketing is a very, very different discipline to social media marketing. And as we go through this session, we will see how that plays out in the whole scheme of things for marketers. Now, one of the really interesting things about what we're looking at today is that there are many, many things to be gained from the real benefit of focusing on social marketing, even though you will find yourself in maybe not a typical organization that is accepted as one that would naturally have been part of the whole birth of social marketing. Social marketing itself began some 50 years ago and started its growth in the concept of really using marketing techniques, marketing communications techniques, to share the benefit of a particular social activity or behavioral type across communities. Okay, and this is very, very different to the typical way that we focus on marketing to sell and market products or services in a commercial sense. So Kotler and Zoltman, who were the early pioneers of social marketing, they figured out that a lot of the things that we do in a more sort of commercial marketing sense could actually be applied to helping organizations, particularly in the public sector, particularly in the health sector and in not-for-profit sectors, to influence people's behaviors, to help them to do something differently, to influence the way that they think about a concept or a particular item or element of their world. So there's a lot of crossover here. This is about thinking about the end audience in your marketing. So whether you're coming at this from a health sector perspective, so you might be part of the NHS in the UK, and you might sort of think, actually, we're going to try and change behaviours to improve health of particular communities. Or you might be looking at this from a local government, local council perspective, to change the way that potentially, I don't know, people do their recycling, for example. And it's all about influencing attitudes and behaviours for better outcomes for society in general and for the communities in which these people reside. Now, of course, if you think about that from a very strategic sense, what you automatically start thinking about is the whole concept of, well, okay, changing behavior could also be used in a commercial sense, because if people understand how to better use our products and services from a commercial perspective, then maybe they'll buy more. Maybe we can influence them to use our products and services more effectively. Now, of course, all of these things ring true. So this is one of the reasons why I think over more recent years, we've seen this blurring of this term, social marketing. And we've seen people sort of like using it incorrectly, if you like, and assuming that it's just part of social media, which clearly it isn't. It is a subset of this broader marketing communications piece, and that's something that we will look at as we go through this session. So what precisely is social marketing? Well, social marketing seeks to influence social behaviours, not to benefit the person communicating the message or the marketer themselves, but to benefit the target audience and society in general. So just breaking that down a little, so it's about influencing social behavior. So there's a lot of community and societal and segment and sector focus here. It's about looking to change and influence those behaviors to the benefit of those people who are changing their behavior. So rather than it about being, okay, I want to sell you a message because there's something in it for me, it's all about, I want to influence the way that you behave and interact as a human being or as a group of human beings for your benefit. And again, if we take a step back into what this really means from a marketing perspective, well, this is pure marketing, because this is the ultimate value add to the messages that we're looking to put through our marketing and communications. So, I mean, in an ideal world, in a commercial sense, if our target audience for maybe our products and services, but also if we're in the public sector for the behaviors of our communities, if those can be influenced for a real kind of win-win perspective, so we win because, you know, we're doing good for those communities and those segments and those customers, but also from their perspective, their world improves, then as marketers, we're getting the best of both worlds. This is pure return on investment of our time and energies. So there is something really pure and sort of proper, if you like, and decent about social marketing as a concept, because this is a true win-win. It's about changing perceptions. It's about influencing values. It's about shaping behaviors so that everybody wins. So again, from a pure marketing perspective, that is, and it fundamentally feels like it is the right thing to be doing. So we can now kind of move on and explore a little bit about, well, okay, how do you do this pure and perfect form of marketing? Well, one of the ways that we can do it is to think about it like a process. And if you happen to be a marketer who has run a social marketing campaign in the past, you'll know that it's very much about driving process, because ultimately, really what you have to be able to do is to control and measure the different outcomes that you see. Now, as commercial marketers, you'll be very, very au fait with the term return on investment. It is slightly different in terms of the return when it comes to social marketing, because what you need to figure out as part of your process of, you know, designing a campaign to affect a behavior and to influence behavior, then actually informing the target audience, so actually encouraging them over a specific period of time to behave in a slightly different way, to interact with each other, to influence each other and support each other. And then to actually support them with the back end process, if you like, that helps them to maintain and sustain that new behavior. Because it is no point in just putting out a message and saying, hey, world out there, you know, you should be doing it like this because it will benefit you, and then just stepping away and going off and doing something else. Because what will happen is they'll say, okay, I hear your message. Yeah, okay, it makes sense. Yeah, okay, I'll behave like this for a little while. But actually then in time, I'm just going to revert back to how I've always been. So part of the social marketing process, and again, this applies to you if you're in the commercial sense as well, is all about thinking about the resources, the timing, the things, the activities that you have to do to support the communications that you're putting out there. So in other words, what is the kind of the back office stuff that you also need to put in place to enable that behavior to change? So a simple little example is a social marketing campaign that I was involved in a few years ago, which was something called Twitter Quitter. And it was all about using Twitter to help people quit smoking. So it was a sort of like an anti-smoking, but in a very positive way. So it used as its information source. So we designed the campaign. The information or the informing was done through Twitter as a very, very clear channel of interaction and conversation to influence the behavior. But it was also then put in place the real kind of real world infrastructure and framework to be able to support people as they went through that sort of stop smoking process themselves as individuals. So this was very much aligning local sort of general practice GP centres and surgeries. It was also combining as well the messages that were going out through chemists, through local sort of retail outlets where people would be buying cigarettes. All of this kind of support infrastructure was also in place. So a lot of thinking about the entire social customer journey had to go into place to be able to inform this and actually make this thing work. Because if it had just been designed as a marketing communications campaign, then pushed out through Twitter, it would have hit the audience and they probably would have listened, but it wouldn't have been able to be sustained. So a big fundamental part of the social marketing process is this support, this kind of holistic approach to think about what else do I need to do to be able to help beyond just the communications part to actually help sustain this behavioral change that I'm looking to foster in this target audience. And then, of course, the fourth point is, can I measure the before and after? So this really is a critical thing to be looking at. Can I investigate as part of the design stage of the process? Can I investigate how people do what they do? How are they behaving? When do they behave like this? What are they actually doing at that kind of very early stage in the process? And then through informing and supporting them, can I, at a defined point in time later, actually show that we've made a difference? So this, of course, can be a numeric thing. This can be done through, literally as that example I just gave, the number of people who stop smoking in a defined area. This could be their attitudes towards smoking. And again, you can put measures of both awareness, but also of the actual influenced behavior at a numerical level, so that you can actually measure that before and after. And of course, you can also look at the more subjective things, some of those softer things in terms of how comfortable did people feel as they went through that process. So part of that control and measurement might also be, as we did in that Twitter Quitter campaign, actually start to look at maybe focus groups beforehand in terms of people's attitudes and behaviors and their feelings and perceptions over smoking. And then at the end of the campaign, actually take maybe the same people or a similar kind of group, take them through a very similar set of questions and see whether we can compare and contrast. So it is a very holistic view. Social marketing in its purest sense isn't just about looking at a behavior, thinking if we can just communicate it. It's about supporting and then actually providing evidence that, that behavior was changed or influenced and changed, or it was sustained into the future. And of course, that would be the ideal scenario. So it is really those four parts of the process: the design, inform, support, and control, that is very much the backbone to social marketing. Now, of course, this implies that it's about moving our target audience to action, not just giving them information. Campaigns like this, any kind of marketing communications campaign, be it in the public sector or the private sector, that just provides information but doesn't really inspire measurable, changeable action and behavior, is not really worth spending any time at all on, because one, you can't really show that there's much of a return, but two, it's not something that you're going to be able to then sort of stand up confidently and say, hey, we could do this again. We've actually created a legacy as a part of our campaign here that we can then replicate and actually show the great value that we're adding to society. So it is all about action. It's all about measurable outcomes. And of course, we can use the tools and techniques from, a commercial marketing sense, and ideally to be stimulating voluntary behavioral change. So not just getting people to do things because we're telling them they have to do it, but actually helping to sustain positive and healthier and sustainable lifestyles by helping them to voluntarily change their behaviors. And of course, once they do that, they become, in lots of ways, very much influencers in this whole mix. And it becomes a really powerful thing that we can do, taking this forward into the future. Now, to start with, where would you begin? I mean, in this whole kind of purposeful kind of attempt really to sort of define something that could be social marketing. Well, it really starts from listening to the environment in which you're in. Now, of course, from a health perspective, and often social marketing, as we've said before, is driven by health campaigns. This is where we see a lot of this activity happening. But if you think about this from a commercial sense, this is also how we can apply this to commercial marketing and communications. What we need to do is to start from a point that is realistic and real, actual realism. So we need to have done our research. We need to have understood kind of the real situations and scenarios that our target audience, be they commercial or be they from a social marketing perspective, that they actually experience. What motivates them? not what we want to see. So we don't want to come at this with our preconceived ideas. We want this to be started from a point of realism and something that's kind of really sound as a foundation for our marketing planning. And this is very much an insight-driven approach. So recognizing that people don't sort of exist in isolation, but that the whole thing that we're dealing with here is actually quite a complex interaction of influencers, influences, and scenarios and contexts. And of course, this then gives a really, really nice sophistication to our marketing, because we know then that the starting point that we're beginning from is not just the world according to us. It's not just because we want to see a better desired outcome. It's actually about a commercial or community reality that is the starting point of one of these very first pillars of our planning process. Now, of course, we do need to sort of remember that this is not necessarily about commercial marketing. Yes, we can apply lots of these principles to commercial marketing, but when we start to enter into this whole sort of social marketing debate, we need to be aware that there are very different approaches depending on these desired outcomes. So from a social marketing perspective, it's far less about profit, which it is obviously in a commercial sense, and it's much more about service objectives. What kind of objectives do we have for these desirable outcomes? We also, from a social marketing perspective, don't use the word customers. It is much more frequent to see the word citizens. I know customers can be used as this kind of sort of generic catch-all word, but certainly in a social marketing sense, we often see the word citizens applied. And we generally will never see the word shareholders. Of course, that has this profit implication from a commercial sense. In a social marketing sense, we see the word stakeholders. And for me, that's a really nice word, which we can also use in commercial marketing, because stakeholders means everybody involved in the program who has a vested interest in its outcome. So let's just listen to that one again. A stakeholder is everybody involved in the project who has a vested interest in the outcome of the project. Now, this might be because they're part of the organization selling the initial message. It might be because they're the recipient of the message, so they are the person who's trying to be influenced. It could be that they're partners who sit around the project, but everybody in this mix who is a stakeholder has a vested interest in this project working well. They might not realize that at the outset, but as part of the communication process, it is your role as a marketer, both commercially, but also public sector, if you're looking at this from a social marketing perspective, to reflect the interests. And these could be very broadly different interests of each of the stakeholders. So it's a really important thing to remember that, and that is a very, very key word for all kind of marketing planning. Who are my stakeholders? And those are people who have a vested interest in the outcome of your project, and it will be from their own perspective. So that's something that we need to be really building into this. Now, of course, this is already starting to introduce the whole idea that this social marketing stuff is potentially quite complex. You know, we have obviously a range of different stakeholders here, lots of different people looking at our campaigns and our communications from different perspectives. Obviously, very timely right now is a political influence. You know, there may well be a certain flavor of the day politically, and that could be from a broad perspective or at a very local perspective. There will certainly be flavors of the day, as we call them, you know, certain things that are in the public consciousness of a real focus. I mean, right now it is about things like plastic and sustainability and carbon footprint, but what else within the mix of thoughts that are going around in the head of your target audience right now are going to influence how they perceive what it is you're communicating? Obviously, we have the media as well. They have a huge part to play in a social marketing campaign. If we can get the media on side, and you've got to figure out who the relevant media stakeholders are, if you can get them on side, buying in as almost like partners to your campaign and your communications, then you have a much stronger chance of seeing supporting messages sitting outside and around your campaign to drive this behavioral change. You may or may not, depending on the type of campaign you're looking to offer, be seeking funding for this. And this could be commercial funding and sponsorship, but it could also be public sector funding. There's a lot of grant materials and grant funding available for projects that are doing social good. It takes a little bit of searching, a little bit of research to find some of these, but they are there and available because, of course, the overriding principle of social marketing is that it is for societal good. So if you're doing a campaign commercially or within the public sector, be thinking about who else at a local level or at a more sort of UK-based level can be supporting me in this complex mix of individuals, organizations, influences, media. Because what you need to do is surround yourself with supporters, and these supporting partners are going to be very, very important to you as you go through understanding kind of, you know, the opportunities you have available to you, but also really understanding what we call in social marketing speak our publics. So these are the audiences, if you like. So in a customer sort of marketing sense, from a commercial perspective, we would probably be talking about these as target demographics or target customer personas, target segments. Within social marketing, we call them publics. And social marketers have a similar and kind of related set of approaches to a more commercial marketing sense as they start to build an understanding of the differences in all the different publics that they're looking to influence. And of course, as we know in marketing generally, segmentation is crucial, that no one size will fit all in either commercial or social marketing sense. You have to be talking a very relevant language as you start to break down, you know, your campaign into little bite-sized chunks so that people can consume their version of your campaign. So it is about, you know, being really focused and targeted. If I go back to that Twitter anti-smoking or stop smoking campaign, no one size fitted all in that campaign. We would have certain messages going out to the target audience if they were heavy smokers. We would go out to social smokers, and we could break down that audience demographic so that we knew that very specific different messages were going out, because of course these are very different approaches in context. So this is, again, pure marketing. You know, we do this in a commercial sense, but we also do it in a social marketing sense, an intimate understanding. We call this kind of professional intimacy. It's a professionally intimate understanding of our target audience. And if we can get to that level, then we stand some chance of really understanding who the other partnerships that we need to be fostering as part of our campaign. Because in a general sense, it's very unlikely to get the best outcomes, you know, those best changes of behaviors. It is about actually working with third parties, with others who have shared goals, maybe similar goals to our own as we go forward. They might be sharing, you know, the same ethos. They might be targeting the same individuals. They might be sort of sharing lots of the very same messages. And often we see, in particularly sort of social and health senses, when we look at social marketing campaigns, often one agency just can't do it alone. They do need those kind of partnerships, and particularly when it comes to that support that I talked about, which goes over and above just purely looking at this from a communications angle and then seeing this as a very much a real world experience for our target audiences. We've got to figure out as well, who do we need to be partnershiping with or getting into partnership with? And this could be partnership in the loosest sense, where the partnership starts with a small lowercase p. So it's just a relationship from an awareness perspective, all the way through to a contractual partnership where actually we're co-reliant on each other as organizations because we simply can't do it ourselves. But it's also about thinking we are going to get much more of an outcome that is positive if we do focus on organizations who do have these shared outcomes that are very, very similar to ours, because almost certainly we're not going to be able to do this to best effect if we work in isolation. And particularly because, as we know, and as consumers of these kinds of messages ourselves, we know that we're bombarded with, you know, a whole myriad of different messages every single day. So to cut through those messages, if we can see that there is this joined up, more powerful message coming at us, then we're more likely to pay attention, and it's more likely to have the impact that we're after. It can also be, from a social marketing perspective, important to really sort of consider the kind of policies that go around the behavioural change that we're looking to instigate. And of course, this can actually motivate change, but can also be hard to sustain if what we're trying to do is flying in the face of, both public opinion, but also the policies that are there to support us as communities or as society in general. So a lot of the time what we're trying to do here is to align our campaigns and our communications with things that are both socially acceptable, they're acceptable to the communities that we're trying to drive this campaign through, and also they're acceptable to the kind of those media and influences that we talked about before. So we do need to see alignment. A lot of the best social marketing campaigns that we see, the ones that really do stimulate, significant behavioral change, are the ones that don't just align themselves with the flavor of the day, they're aligning themselves with long-term government policy, often a lot of the time, aligning themselves with things like that, as well as with the communities and the media and influencers that are very much part of their target audience's world. So it is about alignment, it is about listening, it is very much about understanding the breadth of influence that you have here. And again, as I've said all the way through this presentation, all of this stuff applies equally strongly to commercial marketing as well. So there is this lovely crossover, this lovely cross-fertilization of best practice happening here. So even if you never see yourself running a social marketing campaign, you can certainly learn from a lot of the philosophies that go into making these really, really high-end, really, really high-quality, pure social marketing campaigns. And if you're in social marketing campaigns, this is just good practice. This is all about the checklist of things that you need to do to make sure that you're developing something that can be sustained in the longer term. And of course, that brings us to the whole concept of the social marketing purse. Now, in a commercial sense, we'd probably be calling this budget, but in a social marketing dialogue, we would be looking at the word purse here, because this is about how we're going to fund this particular campaign or this particular sort of project and the operations that will go around supporting it. Now, a lot of the time, these things are funded by sort of donations, could be charitable, could be government grants, but they can also be it can also be really important to be thinking about creating some strategies that include sources of funding that start to be integrated into these campaigns and these projects at certain checkpoints as the project carries through. So it may well be that what you're doing is you're aligning something, again, like that smoking campaign, with when you've actually seen some behavioural change at the far end, you move away from talking necessarily about smoking and you look then to be talking more about kind of healthy lifestyles. In other words, what happens at the end of that campaign? Can you dovetail what you're doing in this sort of initial campaign in with a future campaign, maybe one that somebody else is running, so that you see this kind of nice blending of a journey of experience. So as people become influenced, their behavior changes. Once they've changed, they're no longer that same individual or community that they were. And of course, this happens as well in commercial sense. Once they've bought a product or service, their world is never going to be exactly the same again. So by viewing it from their new perspective and saying, okay, this is our new ground zero, this is our new starting point, what other projects might we then be able to create ourselves? But what other projects might we be able to then align ourselves with? And will that attract, by the very nature that this being a longer term journey into which we're weaving our single project into this more joined up approach, will that in itself give us a higher societal or commercial value? If it does that open up new partnership opportunities? Does that open up us to more funding opportunities? These are all things to be considering as we start to kind of look as to how we can sort of weave this thing in beyond just this initial project ourselves. And then once we've sort of thought of all those things, what we need to then be doing is thinking about a step-by-step process for actually creating what we might call our communication planning framework. And this is a very, very simple, straightforward project management technique that is in use in social marketing. It starts with identifying what the problem is or the need for change. It clearly states as a SMART objective what is the change that we're looking to foster or instigate here. It then looks from a creative perspective at the theme that we're going to run with. It looks and audits all of the opportunities for that piggybacking that we were just talking about there. It might be from an end to an end, your project might be continuing a previous project that somebody else was doing, or maybe you're starting a new theme from the word go. But it's auditing all of those joining up opportunities that you have. It's getting this intimate relationship with the target audience or the demographic that you're after, and having a really kind of sensible look at all the constraints that are around you. And these could be communication constraints, they could be resource constraints, they could be constraints of the amount of noise that your target audience is receiving already. It's a very, very broad word, that word constraints, and you've got to think about this from a variety of different angles. You've also got to consider just how appropriate your target audience will feel this particular campaign is right here, right now. And by appropriateness, it might be that, yes, it's an appropriate campaign, it's just not appropriate right at this moment. And again, you have to really be viewing this from all of your stakeholders' perspectives. It could be that you're coming to the end of a financial year, so from your funder's perspective, this is a good time or not a good time. It could be that you're seeing this as we come out the back end of a sort of like an election or something like that, and so this could be a very opportune moment to strike while the iron's hot, or this could be the worst time to be striking with this particular campaign. So look at this from a whole range of holistic angles and see whether you feel that right here, right now is the appropriate time. It might be the right project, just might not be the right time. And then think about the toolbox. And with the toolbox comes all of the different marketing communication channels. And again, this is very, very similar stage to if you were planning a commercial marketing campaign. And then, of course, we have our step-by-step project action plan. And this is very much our timeline for how we're going to communicate this message with the support in the real world that we talked about before. Then it comes on to communication. Again, that can be a timeline, but it can also be a use of the channels, what we're going to say and when. And of course, our content strategy will probably come into that. Again, this will be a mix of digital and real world communications, undoubtedly. And of course, that all then feeds into our management of our project over its defined life cycle, and also then the reporting back to all stakeholders. And this is all stakeholders. This includes the audience that you are looking to influence, because one of the really nice things about social marketing is this whole ethos of actually sharing the results with the target audience who you have seen the behavioral change come from. Because if they can see that, oh, it wasn't just me that changed behavior, all these people have also done it, that can be another really great way of getting this kind of advocacy, if you like, from within the audience that you're looking to influence. So if they can see that it's not just them, it's everybody else around them, they've also changed, that's a great way of starting to build this really sort of significant momentum to sustain the project beyond the actual end of the communication stage. So all of this happens before, during, and after the campaign. It's almost that once you've instigated a social marketing campaign, it never really stops, because you're able to come back and revisit this thing maybe a year, 2 years, 5 years down the line, and actually see how that behavior has been maintained or not. So a lot of social marketing is measured way, way into the future, probably a lot longer into the future than a typical commercial marketing campaign, which often, once the return on investment, the ROI is being delivered, often you then move on to a new campaign. You might have learned a little bit from the previous one, but often it's kind of when it's done, it's done. Whereas with the social marketing campaign, it is about the longevity of the campaign. It's that legacy that you've left behind. So from the smoking campaign, it will be all about, okay, looking back 3, 4, 5 years now, actually, are these people, are they still non-smokers? How do we actually influence them in the long term? Because if we were only measuring for the length of the campaign, that's not a true behavioral change. That's just a in the moment change. So it is about longevity of measurement. And as I've said, a lot of this is about pure marketing measurement, pure marketing communications, pure marketing planning. So there's a lot that we can take from a commercial sense, because a lot of this, you could say would read over quite nicely into a commercial marketing plan. So developing the plan is about bringing all of those things together. It is about, things like maybe you could put this into the framework of something like a SOSTAC plan. prsmith.org is a great place to get the template for the SOSTAC plan. Many other sort of planning frameworks are there and available. But what I like to think of when I sort of develop a social marketing communications campaign is the final point that's on here, which is all about contingency planning. Because a lot of social marketing activities work from a point of perfection. I think we could probably call it that word. It's almost, it works from a point of ideals. In other words, if you want to achieve a behavioral change, there's no point in just looking for a little incremental change. You're probably looking for a significant change. Smoking example again is, you don't want people to just move from 40 a day to 20 a day. You want people to give up. So a lot of the time what you're looking for in a social marketing campaign is a really fundamental change in behavior. Now, of course, in that is that, we're human beings, we have weaknesses, we don't necessarily develop great habits. And even if we might sort of get a new little habit, we might revert to old behaviors very, very quickly if we don't sustain it. So what kind of contingency plans should we be building into our social marketing campaigns to ensure that if we've got people who are doing things in the short term, or they're almost ready to change behavior, but they don't quite get there, what kind of contingencies could we have to support them? And is half a change better than no change? By setting appropriate goals at the outset, we can decide on how we're going to measure the outcomes. Is it all or nothing? Is it a percentage change is enough? Or is it, we just want to see a little bit of an improvement? I think as marketers, we just need to be very, very clear. I'm not here to say it has to be 100% or nothing, but it's all about really understanding what is good enough, and then going that little bit of extra mile and see whether you can set a stretch target to exceed that. But by having contingency plans in place that, okay, if I don't hit this perfect end goal, this perfect scenario, is there enough in there to actually help me to prove that, there was a good outcome, and it was part of what we desired. It might not have been the full story, but actually we did make some good goals in the end. And of course, that endpoint is about the measuring and reporting. There'll be a whole range of different things that you will want to report on. Again, this feeds over onto the whole commercial marketing thing. There will be some sort of financial ROI. I mean, undoubtedly, if you are spending time and money and budget and funding, there has to be some kind of return on investment. So be very clear about what you mean by return on investment at the start of the project itself. Think about the communication goals. Everything needs to be smart. Everything needs to be specific, measurable, actionable, sort of realistic and to some extent, and also time-bound. And when we talk about time-bound, think about project milestones, not just the start and the end of it, but some of these little checkpoints en route. So if you're doing a campaign that is going to run over the period of maybe a year or 2 years, and a lot of social marketing campaigns will run for that length of time, having project milestones, those little gateways, those little checkpoints or review points is really, really important, both to keep the project running at the same sort of pace and momentum and commitment of others. And of course, if you've got a broad range of stakeholders, that's really important, but also for you as the owner of the project to just kind of refuel yourself at time to time as you go through the project, because it can be hard to keep that momentum up as a human being, and a project manager as you go. Think about the analysis and reporting. It's always about turning the information and the numbers into intelligence. In other words, can we use the intelligence that we've gleaned from what we're listening to as people change their behaviors or as they do something differently? Can we look at this as an ongoing improvement? Because we need to continually learn and continually adapt the project as we go, because the best will in the world, the initial goals and targets that we had, particularly on a longer term project, will probably need to be adjusted as we go forward into the future, maybe a year, 2 years time. So by constantly thinking about this ongoing improvement, we stand a chance of delivering a great outcome at the far end of it. And then if we're having to report this back to a broad range of stakeholders, something like the balanced scorecard, and you can Google that to find out a little bit more about the things that you'd include in there. But the balanced scorecard is a really nice way of giving a holistic view. So not just reporting back the numbers, but actually giving about the whole essence of how the project is actually progressing and kind of what people are feeling, how things are progressing, any kind of changes, any systems or processes that kind of maybe, are underperforming right now, or maybe some of the support isn't quite right and we need to focus on it. It's a lovely early warning system, as well as a celebration of the good stuff that you're doing. So balanced scorecard, well worth looking at there in terms of your reporting. And of course, there are thousands, literally thousands of great social marketing examples. And this is often a way of really getting to really understand the depth and breadth of what a really good social marketing campaign is. So if you're looking to do one yourself, then this will give you some really great steers. I found some really nice examples on the richtopia.com website and also brogan.com. The links are actually on the screen right now, but you can find thousands and thousands of others of really, really interesting examples. For me, what makes a really good social marketing example, and again, this reads across into a commercial sense from a marketing campaign, is when a campaign or a project like this, a communication project like this, can be understood without any words. And I think when the creative and the theme and the message comes at you, cuts through all the noise, makes complete and utter sense from just a simple visual, a little bit like this seatbelt encouragement campaign, which was done in Canada a few years ago. It's just such a simple execution of a very, very important message. And the beauty of social marketing is it can literally be this simple. You don't need lots of brochures. You don't need lots of different, campaign messages. If you can get your message across in one simple visual, one short punchy video, one quick little strap line, one case study or example, then that is when it really, really works. Another great example is when it's really integrated into people's everyday living. This lovely example from the American Disability Association, when, looking at a series of stairs, when, the message is clear, for the average person, yes, they can probably run up those stairs, but for somebody with a disability, for them, a suite of stairs like this or a flight of stairs, it looks like it's Mount Everest. It just gets the message across in a pure, simple, themed execution like this. And this is the power of social marketing, something that can be blended in, but that can actually make such an impact and such a profound difference to behavior that it just stops people and makes them think just for a moment about that message. And then they can choose whether or not to adopt a different behavior, maybe consider something differently, maybe support in a different way. And maybe as a result of this one, which is the whole thing about saving paper, saving the planet, this was the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and they were basically doing a campaign based on a very everyday activity of saving paper with a really, really neat little visual execution. No more words needed to be said. You knew that as you were consuming this product, you were having an impact. So the simplicity of an execution like this is just, it's genius, really, because what it allows you to do is to really take ownership of this message. And the whole beauty of something like this in social marketing is that this isn't about the person next door. This isn't about somebody else. This is all about us being influenced to change our behaviors because we are accountable. And of course, with the whole carbon footprint and plastic debate that's going on right now, the buck does stop with us. It really is all about us as individuals. And that's why we're seeing so many of these kinds of campaigns where the finger is pointing directly at us. Save paper, save the planet. It's not about somebody else's behavior. It's about your behavior. So these, to me, are three lovely examples that really kind of resonate because they are so simple. They're so powerful, they're so impactful, but they're really, really integrated into our everyday behaviors and everyday living. And of course, if we're going to be changing behaviors and changing habits, these are some of the habits that we're going to need to change. So I hope you've seen that this is very much about social marketing, behavioral influence and change, and this is not social media marketing. We can use social media, obviously, and I would proactively say that yes, we should be thinking about using social media as part of the blend of channels that we have at our disposal, right, in our toolkit for our social marketing. But social marketing is very, very different to social media marketing. And we don't need to use these terms interchangeably, because one is a thing of absolute purity and beauty in the whole marketing sense. The other is a set of channels that we can use to communicate that thing of beauty. So hopefully no longer you'll need to kind of get a misunderstanding of what those two things are, and feel free to pull people up and share with them the fact that social marketing is not social media marketing. The two things can work hand in hand for sure, but they are very, very different things. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you. Hopefully you found that interesting little sort of whistle-stop tour through all of the beauty and opportunity within social marketing. I've had a few questions come through on the chat as we've been talking there, so I just wanted to answer those in the few minutes that we have available left to us. The first one was, where do you begin to understand what behaviour you could change in a customer group? That's a really, really interesting one. Yeah, I mean, I would probably go back to the whole customer persona exercise. I think a lot of people have who have listened to sort of any of my sort of webinars or podcasts before will know that I'm really keen on the whole customer profiling down to the level of a persona. Not a big fan of customer demographics, because that doesn't really bring your target customer to life. And of course, within social marketing, what we're looking to do is really see them as real individuals, because it's those real individuals' behavior that we're trying to influence. So I'd say the starting point is your persona exercise. Figure out who's going to have the biggest impact on the objectives that you have from a persona perspective. They're your target audience, and then go through that persona exercise. And then you can understand the kinds of behaviors that they're exhibiting as a persona. It could be a day-to-day thing, it could be a one-off thing that they do, and then those will be some of the targets then that you could work from. Another question was, what's the best campaign example you have worked on and why? I mean, I'll go back to that Twitter quitter example. I was, so particularly proud being part of that one. The numbers were good. Yeah, that was, something that did have an impact, certainly, on the local sort of community that we were focusing on. I think for me, the reason why that was such a good one is because we used one social network, clearly Twitter, at the time to really sort of focus the whole thing. So the target audience knew where they had to go. And by actually building the name of the network into the actual campaign, and of course you have that nice little simple sort of play on words, Twitter quitter. It gave a real ownership to that particular channel. So yeah, we could have used any other one, but because we managed to get that kind of resonance in there, it was just a logical choice. So I think probably, yeah, that's probably the one I'd be most excited and proud of, I think. Another question: in business, we're about ROI, so does social marketing fit? Yeah, I think social marketing has to fit really within ROI. I think it's a little bit different to commercial marketing, where often we're targeted with probably short-term gains because we've got to get the sales numbers this month or this quarter or whatever. With social marketing, it is much more about the longer-term brand gain. So if you're in a commercial organization looking to take some of these good principles across into your world, I think don't think of a social marketing or behavioral change as a quick fix. Most of this social marketing stuff will take a long time to take effect, but it's worth it in the long run, both in terms of the gains that your brand will have, but also in the way that you can actually influence how your customers or your target audience interact maybe with a particular product or service you offer. So it isn't a quick fix. And if you're focused on ROI, it's got to be a longer term return on investment. And final question was, can you run social media campaigns and social marketing at the same time? Can you run social media campaigns and social marketing at the same time? I think you can, otherwise I'd be probably contradicting my previous answer. I think you can, as long as you're very, very mindful of your customer or your target audience's journey. Because if you think your target audience is going to get a little bit confused by messages of different styles or different tones or with different end goals, if you like, coming at them all at the same time, they're going to get confused. So I think, I think this is the right answer. So if you can blend any kind of social media campaigns that you're doing with your social marketing approach, so maybe take the social marketing as the more kind of strategic, longer term thing, and then maybe as part of your customer journey, see where you can integrate some of your social media activity to support that high level social marketing. I think it's that way round. So it's led by the social marketing, the behavior change, and then you infill maybe some of the campaign sort of level things, some of the more kind of sort of tactical stuff, the day-to-day stuff, using social media. That's probably the best way round. So don't become beholden to the social media itself. Think of those social networks as the tools that are going to help you and will support your social marketing campaign. And I think if you do it that way round, that probably feels like a more kind of obvious way of doing things. So think customer journey for that one. Right, well, that's all we have time for in this particular session. So thank you very much for listening. If you're watching this on catch up and you have any further questions at all that you'd like to ask about this whole social marketing subject, feel free to contribute to any of the threads that you see below, or any of the comment sections that you see below this particular link, and I will endeavour to answer those as soon as I possibly can. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you found this session useful, and I will look forward to speaking with you again in a not too distant future.